Sunday evening, August 15th, 1971. A retired schoolteacher named Dorothy is sitting in her living room in Dayton, Ohio, watching Bonanza. She has $40,000 in US savings bonds, a whole life insurance policy her husband paid into for 20 years, a pension from the school district she trusts completely. She has done everything right. Then the show cuts out. Richard Nixon appears on screen. He is calm, presidential. He uses the word temporarily. He assures her that if she buys American products in America, her dollar will be worth just as much tomorrow as it is today. Dorothy goes to bed. The Dow surges the next morning. Nixon wins re-election carrying 49 states. The New York Times editorializes that it unhesitatingly applauds the boldness. Over the next 9 years, Dorothy's savings bonds lose 53 cents of purchasing power on every dollar. Her pension, denominated in dollars, buys less each year than the year before. The whole life policy becomes one of the worst performing financial instruments in America. She did not make a single bad decision. She followed every rule. The rules were quietly rewritten while she was watching television. The question most people ask about the 1970s is, what caused the inflation? That is the wrong question. The right question, the one with direct implications for right now, is this. When every major currency on Earth is failing simultaneously, when there is no safe foreign currency to escape into, where do you go? That situation existed once in modern history. Exactly once. And the documented answer is not what most people expect. The official story says the 1970s was an American inflation problem, a stagflation episode, a Carter-era malfunction that Paul Volcker eventually fixed. The forensic record tells a completely different story. The British pound collapsed so badly that the United Kingdom, a founding member of the IMF, an institution that normally dealt with developing nations, was forced to beg for a bailout, $3.9 billion, the largest in IMF history at that time. The Italian lira disintegrated so completely that the country ran out of coins. Banks issued emergency scrip called miniasegni, tiny printed certificates in denominations of 50 to 350 lire, because physical currency had become too scarce to use. The French franc failed 4 separate attempts to maintain a stable exchange rate. Japan's domestic inflation hit 23 to 25%, among the worst of any developed nation, even as the yen appreciated against the dollar. The Deutsche Mark held better than anyone else, and German inflation still peaked at 7%. The Swiss franc, the strongest currency on Earth, appreciated 157% against the dollar over the decade, and gold rose 2,329%. There was no safe foreign currency. Every paper door was locked. The Swiss franc, the very best exit available, delivered roughly 1/15 of what gold returned. This is not a story about American inflation. This is a story about what happens when the entire global monetary system loses its anchor at once. Nixon's speechwriter William Safire was in the room at Camp David the weekend of August 13th, 1971, when the decision was made. He noted afterward that more time was spent debating whether to preempt Bonanza than discussing how the economic program would actually work. 15 minutes of television scheduling. That is what the end of Bretton Woods received. What forced the decision was a run on American gold. France had sent a warship to New York Harbor to collect its gold reserves. Britain had requested $3 billion in gold on August 11th. The United States had roughly 10,000 metric tons remaining, against $40 billion in foreign dollar liabilities. The math was already broken. Camp David made it official. Paul Volcker, then Under-Secretary of Treasury for International Monetary Affairs, later wrote that if the British, who had founded the system with the US, and who had fought so hard to defend their own currency, were going to take gold for their dollars, it was clear the game was indeed over. Nixon used the word temporarily. It became permanent. The Smithsonian Agreement of December 1971 was supposed to save the system. Nixon called it the most significant monetary agreement in the history of the world. It lasted 15 months. By March 1973, every major currency was floating, and sinking. 3 men called this before it happened. All 3 were dismissed as eccentrics. All 3 were correct. Franz Pick was born in 1898 in Bohemia. He had watched the Austrian hyperinflation as a young student. He fled the Nazis, served in the Czech underground, and settled in Manhattan, where he papered his office walls with facsimiles of French assignats and American continental dollars, what he called the world's first two fraudulent currencies. He charged seminar admission in Krugerrands. His most famous line, "Every government bond is a certificate of guaranteed confiscation. Never has a government debt been reimbursed fully to the imbecile who bought it." In 1976, when gold had fallen 24% from its peak, someone asked Pick if the declining price shook his faith. He said, "Not in the slightest. Gold has no master. It is always victorious." Harry Browne published How You Can Profit from the Coming Devaluation in 1970, when gold was still $35 per ounce. He predicted a dollar devaluation was 90% certain by the end of 1971. His follow-up, published in 1974, spent 39 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list and reached number 1. Anyone who followed his 1970 advice saw a 24 times return by January 1980. James Dines began recommending gold in 1960 at $35 per ounce. His employer, Kidder, fired him when he refused to renounce his predictions. He published his own newsletter independently for over 60 years. By 1980, Barron's wrote that his call, that gold would one day cross the Dow Jones Industrial Average, begins to look like one of the most fantastic investment calls on record. One detail that should make you stop. Americans could not legally own gold bullion until January 1, 1975. For the first 4 years of this crisis, the primary escape hatch was a federal crime for ordinary citizens. The workarounds were gold mining stocks, Swiss bank accounts, and pre-1933 numismatic coins. By the time Americans could legally buy physical gold, the price had already tripled. The government made it illegal to protect yourself during precisely the years when protection was most needed. Now, the forensic record. What actually worked? The first was physical gold. Not paper claims on gold, not gold funds, physical metal. Gold closed 1971 at $44.60 per ounce. By end of 1973, it had crossed $100 and never returned below it. In 1979 alone, it ran from $233, breaching $300 in July, $400 in October, $500 in November, and $600 on New Year's Day 1980. On January 21, 1980, the London PM Fix recorded $850 per ounce, a 24 times multiple in 8.5 years. The second was real estate with fixed-rate debt. The mechanism is counterintuitive. Inflation erodes the real value of fixed debt. A homeowner who borrowed $100,000 at a fixed rate in 1971 was effectively repaying that loan with dollars worth 53 cents by 1980. Inflation was destroying the debt on their behalf, while the underlying property held its real value. The third was commodities broadly: oil, agriculture, raw materials, anything with physical scarcity that could not be printed. Art specifically. Documented records show average annual appreciation of 33.2% from 1973 to 1981. The fourth, the Swiss franc. Partial credit only, and this is critical. The franc appreciated 157% against the dollar over the decade, a real documented meaningful hedge, also 1/15 of what gold returned. The best currency on earth was not even close. Now what went to zero? Savings accounts capped by Regulation Q at 5.25% while inflation ran 7 to 14%. A person who deposited $100,000 in 1971 accumulated roughly $158,000 in nominal terms by 1980. That $158,000 bought approximately $77,000 worth of goods in 1971 purchasing power. They lost nearly a quarter of their real wealth while believing they were earning interest. Long-term Treasury bonds, negative 3.43% annual real returns throughout the decade. The worst performance in a 40-year bond bear market. Annuities, whole life insurance, any fixed nominal payment denominated in dollars, Dorothy's savings bonds, Dorothy's pension, Dorothy's whole life policy. She held claims on institutions that were quietly inflating those claims away. Paul Volcker was sworn in as Fed chairman on August 6, 1979. He was 6 feet 7 inches tall. He smoked cheap cigars. He took a pay cut from $110,000 to $57,500 for the job. On October 6, 1979, the Saturday before Columbus Day, he called a secret, unscheduled emergency meeting of the Federal Open Market Committee. He announced the Fed would stop targeting the federal funds rate and instead target the money supply directly, letting interest rates go wherever they needed to go. The rate climbed past 17% in April 1980. It hit 20% by late 1980. Mortgage rates peaked at 18.63% in October 1981. Angry farmers blockaded the Federal Reserve with tractors. Car dealers mailed coffins containing car keys to Volcker's office. Home builders mailed bricks with postage stamps attached. Volcker received death threats and required Secret Service protection. Gold peaked on January 21, 1980, 5.5 months after Volcker's appointment. 1. Gold peaks when people lose faith in all institutions simultaneously. Gold crashes when one institution credibly commits to restoring order at any cost. The 1970s did not end through market forces or international cooperation. It ended because one man was willing to cause 2 recessions and 10.8% unemployment to break inflationary psychology. The open question for today, at 121% debt to GDP, with $1 trillion in annual interest payments now exceeding defense spending, could any modern central banker do what Volcker did? Central banks purchased over 1,000 tons of gold in each of 2022, 2023, and 2024, 3 consecutive record years, more than double the prior decade's average. Gold hit $5,602 on January 28, 2026. The institutions that manage the monetary system are hedging against their own potential failure. That is not a fringe position. It is their revealed purchasing behavior. Go back to Dorothy in Dayton. She was not naive. She was not careless. She saved in the formal system, bought what the financial establishment told her was safe, and trusted every institution she had been given reason to trust. By 1980, every one of those institutions had quietly eroded her savings by roughly half. Not through a crash, not through a crisis she could see, through a slow, invisible, decade-long transfer of purchasing power from people like Dorothy to the institutions managing the currency. The lesson of the 1970s was not written by Nixon. It was not written by OPEC, or by the Fed, or by any government. It was written by the people who held physical gold when it was illegal, through Swiss accounts and mining stocks and numismatic coins, and who watched a 24 times return unfold over 8.5 years, while the rest of the country wondered why groceries kept getting more expensive. They didn't predict the crisis. They simply understood that the anchor had been cut, and that when an anchor is cut, paper floats away and metal sinks to the bottom where it waits. Several of you asked the question that comes right after this one.